So everyone knows, for the C-spine, you do not need a 14 by 17. This is the size plate that you're going to use for all pictures. I know some people are working at a site where their x-ray plate is the entire board. So if you see anything bigger than this, as far as light field, they're doing it way wrong, okay? And it will always be in portrait. So I'm going to start off with the lateral views, and then I'll move on. So Mike, I'm going to have you put your shoulder against the board, and then face me. I always have the patient put their shoulder against the board. I don't let them lean into the board. They need to stand nice and straight against the board, because it'll also help them from swaying. Because there's a lot of people that are afraid to touch your board, and then they're like moving all over the place. Yeah, I'm sure you guys have experienced that. So it's really important that you give them some kind of what am I trying to say? Like spot where they can balance themselves. Okay. So Mike, I'm gonna have you look straight ahead. Raise your chin a little bit. So you have to be very careful. You don't want them to raise their chin too much, but you also don't want them to have their chin down at all, because the mandible will obscure and get in the way of the spine if their chin is down. So you definitely don't want it down, but you also don't want them to hyperextend, because it can also close the joints in the neck from you extending, or the base of the skull might get in the way if they raise their chin too high. Okay? There we go. So you're going to be putting your central ray at C4. It's about halfway between the shoulder and the EAM, okay? And then when you're collimating, you're going to want to make sure you have the light open to the top of the EAM, and then down just about where your shoulder begins. And if you guys all feel the back of your spine, you can feel the little notch. That is C7, okay? So that's right about where your shoulder starts or begins, okay?
You said top of the light to where again? Sorry.
So the top is going to include the EAM. Okay. And then, Mike, I'm going to have you tilt your head a little bit. Right there. Perfect. And you want them straight on. How you know if you have a perfect lateral is, I'll show you guys in lecture, but there's a little saddle-like bony anatomy that's called the sella turcica, and that's going to let you know, as long as it's superimposed, that means you have a really good lateral. Okay? But I'll go over that in lecture. And then another thing I do is I always tell the patients to relax their shoulders down. Imagine holding a bag that has like a bowling ball or a very heavy purse. So it relaxes their shoulders down, and then you can usually penetrate through to CC7 a lot easier if they do that. Some people are just very muscular, so you're gonna have to do a swimmer's, which I will show you guys that view next week. Okay?
Yeah, I'm not looking at 72 inch?
Yes.
Oh.
Yes.
Okay.
And then I'm gonna have you put your back against the board. So now I'm gonna show you guys the obliques. Actually, you know what? I'm gonna have you back. Sorry. So this is so this positioning is for your C-spine, right? You're gonna be going down, centering midway down the spine, so that you're going through that thickest part. And then I always put my marker anterior. I never put it posterior, because sometimes people move and then it gets in the way. Whereas anterior, I don't have that issue as much.
So his center is at C4, but then the line should be like by his ear?
Right.
Okay.
Because you want it to go through the thicker part of anatomy.
Okay. Do you mind positioning him so I can take a picture?
Yeah.
Oh.
Right there.
Okay.
Thank you.
And then before I move on, I'm going to show you what the airway picture would look like. It's also called the soft tissue neck. So basically, it's essentially the same, except now we're going to pull Mike back. And we want to make sure we include his entire nose. So you might need to open up a little bit more. And you need to make sure that he's back enough that you're getting all of that soft tissue. We don't really care about this back portion, because what happens is you usually do this on little kids. They shove stuff up their nose or they swallow a battery or something. They want to make sure there's no airway obstruction.
Swallow coins.
So right here. Don't move forward, Mike.
Oh, okay.
So you want to make sure you include the entire nasal area, and then you're going to be x-raying more down the anterior part because that's where your airway is and where your esophagus is. So you're going to be x-raying to see if there's anything blocking that.
So the only difference would be you're including his nose, and then I know technique you go down further.
Yes, definitely, because you want the soft tissue to show up more. You're not focused on the bony anatomy, so you would definitely bring the technique down as well. Mm-hmm.
So, and this, do you change where the CR is located?
No, the CR would be the
CR
same.
stays
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But you do need you keep moving forward, Mike.
Yeah.
But you do need to make sure that the entire nose and everything is in the light. Okay? That's the difference between this one and the C-spine. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
C-spine, it's okay if you clip the nose in front of the face. This one, no. Okay. Thank you. Now you can put your back against the board. Now we're gonna do the obliques, and for this one, you will see techs do it all the time at 40 inches. That is not the SID. It's between 60 to 72 inches is your SID for the obliques, okay?
60 to what?
72,
67, okay.
because you're going 10 to
Mhm.
15 cephalic.
So it's not 40.
Okay. So it's definitely not 40. The book does mention that it is doable at 40, but that's because if you have someone tabletop, you're not gonna be doing it at 72 inches. It is nothing to do with them standing. A lot of engineers also have the equipment set for 40 inches, which I don't know why. They need to push it back to 60. But there's two reasons why. One is because of OID, so when the person's oblique, they're not exactly against the board. And then number two, it actually, when I looked up the radiologist journal, they do want to see down into the thoracic spine a little bit. So if you have it too close, it's going to be magnified and you're not going to be able to see that far down. So that's another reason why they want this distance. Okay? The focus of this also is the intervertebral foramina. Okay? So I'm going to show you guys the posterior obliques. So because it's a posterior oblique that we're doing, the angulation is cephalic. If it's an anterior oblique where he's facing the board, then you would be angling the tube caudal. Okay? And it's so that you open up those intervertebral foramina. That's just how your anatomy works. Okay? So I just think it would be much easier for everybody to do it posterior oblique so that you don't have to worry about getting up on a stool and angling down if the patient was really tall. I've had to x-ray 7 feet tall patients. Another thing is if the patient is still coming off the board, it's maxed out, you can have them sit on a stool to lower them, so then it's more manageable. I've had to do that on a patient who was, 7'4"? Yeah. And I'm 5'3", so.
Big people problems.
So, yeah. Anyways, so now I'm gonna have Mike match my feet. So I'm gonna have your feet, yep, perfect. So he's at a 45 degree, okay? And then he's gonna turn his head to the side, okay? This is how you're gonna position your patient for those obliques. Again, you're gonna be at C4. So it's, again, right about halfway. I'm gonna push Mike back a little bit so that I don't miss his spine. And then I'll need to raise this up.
And then what did you say the angle was?
15. Yes. Thank you, Brenda. Okay. And then I always put the marker down for the way the patient is facing. So he's in an LPO position, so I'm gonna put my left marker. Someone asked if you can put your right marker, and that is frowned upon. So if you're gonna do the right marker, it would be on this side closest to me. But because he's in the left posterior oblique, it almost gets a little confusing, like it's a mismark. So that's why it's best to keep the marker on the board in the oblique position that they're in. So Mike's left side is closest to the board, so I have my left marker on there. Does that make sense, or is that
Yeah.
confusing?